Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the 7-Minute Takeover, where we chat all things acquisitions. We're your hosts. I'm Liz Prey.
I'm Eamon Gamble.
Hi there. Today we're tackling a segment on an acquisition accelerator, and it's how to spot misalignment in your advisors.
Sometimes deals die for many different reasons. A common one can be that the advisors on the sell side of the table cause it to go down the drain.
You've gotten to the point where you've got a negotiated LOI, you're ready to enter due diligence, and you bring in the other parties that are involved. So when you're at this point in the deal, you've got a negotiated offer. Now is when the other voices join the party. And that means your lawyer, their lawyer, your accountant, their accountant, the lender. You've got multiple other voices now at the table contributing to a deal that's baked, or it's already in the oven, and now the other characters come onto the stage. Eamon, who's involved there?
We spend a lot of time talking about who's advising you as the buyer, but there is, like you mentioned, a whole suite of other people that are advising the seller. And for a lot of the sellers, this is their first time selling a business as well. And so to a certain degree, they're just as inexperienced as you are if it's your first time buying a business. And so they are going to be heavily reliant on their advisory team as well.
It's people they might have built decades of trust with, and these are their go-to people.
So, the most obvious ones are going to be their legal counsel. They will typically have accountants, either their corporate accountants, their personal tax accountants, or even their internal accounting team. And quite often there's going to be a broker as well representing them. So those are kind of the main actors that we're talking about here today.
Okay, fantastic. And so there's a few elements that can really rock the boat with the seller's advisor team. And so one of the first ones is goal alignment. The second being, what did we say it was?
Yeah, it's going to be their experience in M&A.
One of the most obvious ones. Make sure that the other team has experience in M&A, and if they don't, we'll tackle that in a moment. And the third is ego that creeps up. So advisors are charging their clients for the value that they bring. They're trying to demonstrate, their strengths and do their job and deliver for their client. And a lot of these advisors, their role is to protect their client and make sure they're making wise decisions. However, in an M&A transaction, the ultimate goal is to get the deal across the line while also protecting the client. But experienced M&A advisors will be able to navigate that process as smoothly as possible with the end intention reached.
Yeah, and I think when you mention goal alignment, you touched on it. A lawyer's going to look for legal risks. An accountant's going to look for accounting risk. A tax specialist is going to look for tax risks. And so, they may not have the exact same goal in mind as you of getting the deal done, especially when they may charge hourly and not on a success fee. And so they may not have the exact same goal in mind that you do. So ultimately, you as the buyer are hoping that all of their advisors are pushing the same direction. But those are some of the root causes that may cause the advisors to inadvertently, let's hope, slow a deal down or kill it ultimately. So if you're a buyer and let's say, like you said, we've just gotten to the point where you've gone under offer with a seller, how should a buyer try to identify as early as possible whether this is going to be a risk for their specific transaction?
So there's a few things that you can pick up on early on. So really in the first 1 to 2 weeks of diligence, you can pick up some of the behavior characteristics. So one of the things to look for would be when the LOI comes back, if you're at the LOI stage, or if you've reached even the definitive purchase agreement, is everything coming back redlined? Are they picking up every standard clause and picking it apart and rehashing things that have already been negotiated, that can trigger maybe a lack of M&A experience, or where they're trying to redig into details that could be overcome conversationally, or that have already been negotiated, and maybe both parties are completely satisfied with those terms, but they're digging them up to reopen negotiations. So that can be one thing to watch for is, okay, are we dealing with someone who's going to be difficult or more detail oriented at every point? Because it's going to increase fees as well.
That's the big problem as well. It's just going to be a lot more expensive for everyone. And as the buyer, you have every right to ask who their advisory team is. You can ask this pre-LOI, but certainly once you're under LOI and due diligence is beginning, looking to understand who the parties you're going to be dealing with are from a legal and accounting perspective. So you may be able to judge just based on their personal profile, like, hey, that lawyer's a divorce lawyer according to their LinkedIn profile. You may want to ask how much experience they have, and if you're really concerned, maybe asking the seller if that makes sense to have them as their legal counsel. It may be difficult to get them to change their mind on who to work with based on their counterparty's recommendation, but it can at least highlight to you early on whether it may be a challenge or not.
And one thing on that note that you can do is actually you can ask your lawyer if they have any recommendations for other counsel that they've worked with before, that they know they've gone through M&A deals together, and make recommendations for the seller about who potentially they can use. Ultimately, whoever they engage, their obligation is to their client, and so it's easy for one lawyer to make a recommendation to another firm that they have a good relationship with.
And I'd say the other early clue that something may be amiss with the advisory team is, once you're under offer, you're going to send out a due diligence list. You're going to get information back. You're going to ask follow-up questions. Just the pace and the sophistication with which you're getting answers, their understanding of why you're asking questions. If you feel a lot of pushback, like, why are you asking these questions? That may just be an indication that they aren't as experienced going through this and understand the transparency that's required to actually get a deal across the line. And so that's going to be within the first couple of weeks of your offer stage where you might be able to get a feel if there's going to be challenges. So we've identified maybe how you can tell if there's going to be challenges, but this is an acquisition accelerator segment. So
what do we do?
What do we do?
So if the seller is working with a broker, you can lean on their broker to provide that seller with some more coaching. If they've never sold a business before, the broker is there to help coach them through best practices, what's norm, that sort of thing. The broker can also make recommendations for advisors that they've worked with in the past. One of the other things that we didn't mention is sometimes the seller's accountant can get involved later in the process, and they may have a difference of opinion around the purchase price or the valuation of the business. That's also an area where the broker can come in and set realistic expectations for the accountant, share what's market. Obviously, if it was run as a competitive process, the market dictated what the value of the business was worth based on the offers that were received. And so sometimes that trail of information wasn't translated to the accountant, and the accountant can, their voice, if they've been involved in the business for many, many years, their voice can carry weight and kind of disrupt the seller's perception of value or what they've agreed to. So really leaning on the broker can be one of the solutions there.
Yeah. I'd say the next one is, if you're thinking about who has the closest incentive alignment to you as the buyer, it's the seller personally. They obviously want to sell their business. They want their employees to be moving into a situation where they have a high likelihood of success. They want their clients to be treated well, and they want the deal to close. And so if you are experiencing roadblocks with the advisory team, and this could even include the broker, which, they can help, but sometimes they can pose their own challenges, is establishing a relationship directly with the seller. The more direct line of communication you have with the seller, the better for a few reasons. One is that you're not going to handle all the negotiations on these complex items through lawyers, which is going to cost you and the seller a lot of money. You can get to a high level agreement on certain topics before handing it off to your advisors to execute. You let the seller know that you are a trustworthy individual. When they hear your request coming through multiple layers of advisors, things can get misinterpreted. It may sound like you're just being greedy when really there's a legitimate reason for the thing that you're asking for. So being able to establish that directly with a seller can remove a lot of friction.
Absolutely. And that ultimately the trust that you build with the seller can be what carries you through all the way to closing with that owner. And building that trust in the beginning will help you overcome the challenges that both advisory parties can bring to the deal. So hopefully we've given you some insight. Be able to identify when there might be some friction coming up with the advisors, work with your advisor team also to help you navigate through some of these obstacles that come up, and ultimately have that good relationship with the seller so that you guys can get to the other side of this.
Perfect. Thanks, Liz.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope that was helpful.
See you next time.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, please be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and check out our website at villagewellth.com.